Hello everyone and welcome to Zach's Garage. Now today you join me with something very special indeed. Today we have the world's first flying car in the garage. So we are fortunate enough to be joined with the UK manager of PAL-V, Andy, and he is going to run us through some of the amazing features of this car and the future of the company. Now make sure to stay tuned for the end of the video for some exciting news as well. So, Andy, thank you so much for coming along and bringing this marvellous creation with you. I know there's so many people who have lots of questions, but if you're happy, would you be able to show us around this amazing vehicle?
Yeah, sure, Zach. Firstly, thank you very much for inviting us to these hallowed turf of Zach's Garage. It's a great privilege for all of us at PAL-V to be here, and very exciting moments for us. We are very close now to achieving our road legal status. That's coming up very shortly, I'm sure, and whilst many people are often very focused on the aviation side, that's a huge part for us, and after all it is a flying car, so the car part is quite a big part. So, yeah, essentially we have a twin-engined flat 4, roughly 3.2 litres of the two engines, powering us. One of those will be utilised for the road, with 100 horsepower fuel injected, and the second one will be joining forces for the flight mode, so we have a bit built-in redundancy, which is of course a great thing, safety being the number one in the aviation world. So yeah, and you can see it's a very nice little two-seat sports car style. We have a very low C of G, so you get a real feeling of speed. We have a sequential gearbox powering that nice 100 horsepower fuel injected engine. And also the driving position is a very commanding one. It makes you feel like you're really in charge of a flying machine, even though you may be only driving through the leafy streets of Surrey or somewhere in the Côte d'Azur perhaps. So looking around the car, the features we have, we also have a very rakish design, also incorporating the airflow scoops, which then provide lots of air and thrust going through to those two mighty Rotax powered units. The structure itself is very cleverly designed so that whilst we are in flight mode, this is all lifting up into position. And then the rotor system folds out and we have a huge rotor then that is powered as a gyrocopter by the propeller on the back. So this allows us then to generate the airflow through the rotor system, but also it's in a state of permanent auto rotation. So what we don't have is the situation, should we have a total fuel loss or something, someone decides to not put enough fuel in to complete the journey, we have an absolutely wonderful backup in the fact that it's an auto gyro, so that essentially it will float down to the ground and allow you a perfect landing. So this is always a built-up part of the aviation world in which we try to develop a safe product.
And so, obviously, as you were saying, safety being the number one priority for, the aviation world. Is there certain things that you've had to look into that when you went to design 50% of it being the car part, you had to then adapt and change because of the aviation part, such as like crash rigidity, things like that? Because obviously, coming from someone who knows nothing about the aero world, it's very interesting to see half of this being from the car world, but half of it also being from the aero technology.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, just taking an aircraft and creating a car sounds ever so simple. That's where the challenges certainly begin. In terms of car regulations, yes, it's taken some time to make the adaptations, and they are primarily involved again with the security cell and the construction and the safety of that cell of the occupants whilst in drive mode, and that is quite a divergence from the aviation sector.
Fantastic. I mean, it's a fascinating. It's just a fascinating creation. I mean, would you say that you guys were the first company to actually physically produce a car that flies or a plane that drives?
It seems to be a contentious claim. However, we would state that we are going to be now the first vehicle that is actually approved and regulated and certified as both a car and a fully legitimate flying machine, and it's scheduled for production in the next 6 to 8 months. We will start to ramp up this, and it will become the first production flying car.
It's unbelievable. And what I love, and I think we spoke about this before we got on camera, was the fact that looking at it, it looks almost like a bullet shape as off a car, But then you've got this crazy contraption that if you never knew that it was a flying car, you look on top of it and you think, what is that? And then you see like sort of small hints of before flight, and you sort of then realise, I think it's going to be such an amazing thing to see, you know, driving around areas and also flying, you know, turning up to these, you know, flying coffee meets where you go to airfields and you see someone, and this could be parked in the car park but take off with all the Cessnas. You know, it's incredible. And so, as this is a car channel, I have to ask, the car part of this, what certain things have you done to this to make it a sports car, as you call it? So, for instance, the gearbox, the engine, sort of, not necessarily have you taken anything from any vehicles? So, for instance, like the new Morgans have BMW bits. What have you done there?
No, I mean, this is part of the trick and part of the challenge that PAL-V and ourselves and the regulators have had. And certainly all of the components we are utilising, with the exception of the bought-in certified Rotax engines, are actually fully bespoke for us. The gearbox, for example, is able to drive the 2 drive shafts for normal driving mode. However, when we engage the second engine and put her into flight mode, she then is able to power, independently of the wheels, the propeller on the back to give us forward propulsion. So it's got some very unique aspects to this vehicle that are absolutely bang on for us and only us.
Amazing. And so, I mean, when you were talking earlier about how, with the press of a button, will all of the top propellers and the rear propellers and the rear wings, will they all be hydraulically operated, so you won't have to hop out, open it all up manually, or will you still have to do certain things manually?
Yeah, I mean, that's a bit of a conflict of interest. So from a aesthetics point of view, it would be super if you're driving around, let's say for example the M25, and see a road matrix sign indicating traffic ahead, press the button and it's tally up, old chap.
Yeah.
The reality is, for an aviation regulation, we must endure a certain amount of hand working on the process. So we have to be involved in the process of changing from driving mode. So whilst it's pneumatically assisted, there are certain key points which you must corroborate as being engaged. So for example, the rotor system, the mast system, pre-flight checks, exactly. So whilst we could possibly mechanically operate the system within 5 minutes, then a good thorough walk around would ensure that we probably have a 10 to 12 minutes transfer time, which again is minimal given the advantages you're going to have whilst looking down upon the traffic.
And total airspeed?
Maximum airspeed is around about 110 miles an hour.
Okay.
Road speed, we know the figure we need to surpass, 88 miles an hour.
Exactly, 88 miles an hour. And if anyone, comment down below if you know why it needs to surpass 88 miles an hour.
But she does in fact exceed 100 on the road.
That'd be incredible.
Conditions permitting.
I mean, unfortunately this will never be able to be conveyed via video. The driving position of this is unbelievable. If this thing never flew and was just a sports car, you feel like you're doing 1,000,000 miles an hour just sitting there. So it is fairly incredible. And now, talking of sitting in it, I think if we have a little look inside of the vehicle, and so let's get to the inside of the car. Taking a step inside then, I have to ask, so we'll go from driving to flying. So driving aspects, could you explain just for a second to the people who are watching how you've worked about rudder, accelerator and clutch? In terms of, because you've said that the accelerator and the clutch then become a rudder?
Correct.
And so how does that work in terms of when you change over from flying to driving, is there something you have to fiddle with down there or not so much?
Well, it's all connected with the linking operations. So once we actually activate the elevated position of the aircraft, or with the vehicle becomes the aircraft, all of these components are then automatically transferred into their new function.
Okay. And so driving wise, you've obviously got paddles, sequential box. Will that be quite a smooth sequential box, or do you think it'll be a bit more of a, because some people prefer a bit more of a strong sequential box, some people prefer something a bit softer, or is this all things pre-prototype sort of working out?
What you'll find is that the car delivers a sporty feel, and so it's got a zappy gearbox, which obviously if driven gently, she's less zappy than if you're really giving it the beans and you're running down the road in a sporty environment, and then it can certainly deliver a quick gear change.
Everything, I know I keep saying it's remarkable, it really is quite something. And I remember we spoke at Salon Privé about when you turn, the whole body leans.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
could you elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, I mean, many people will have seen the proof of concept vehicle, which was itself based on a Carver, the Dutch famous Carver vehicle, which tilted up to, I think, a crazy angle of somewhere around 40 degrees. This one, however, has a wider track than the Carver and doesn't need such an angle. This will tilt into the corner at approximately 5 degrees, so it gives you a certain amount of feel whilst also making it more of a sure-footed drive in those twisty country road sections.
And so does that mean that you're then able to have less of a steering angle?
Not necessarily, but it will give you a more of a sure-footed feel, as I said,
Yeah.
just so that it will actually be more directional. So I don't think it lessens the input, more just gives you a firmer control through the radius of the bend.
And so will that still happen in flight? Will the body then rotate to then pitch the rotors?
No, I
It
mean,
won't.
no, I mean, of course, you're going to be flying as a true aircraft
Yes,
with
yeah.
a fixed rotor mast,
Yeah.
which will then dictate your angle. Will be dictated by the joystick position.
It's remarkable. And so, in terms of avionics, obviously the whole passenger side is all avionics, but you were saying it's a fairly simple layout for people to get used to?
Absolutely. So in front of the driver position, you have the regular controls, be it indicators, horns, hazard lights, parking locks, and so on. To the right of that is a small digital speedometer indicating what your current road speed would be. To the right of that, we have the onboard avionics system, which is currently powering up and showing you an electronic compass with a bug heading, so we could plot in a route. It also has a moving map display, which is swappable on the screen, and of course the mandatory artificial horizon there to give you an indication of your position relative to the horizon. Further to the right, we have the transponder and the radio, all part of the necessary package for avionics. And underneath that, we have the two engine management systems, which to the right is the road engine, showing the fuel, the temperature, and to the left is the aviation engine, which is utilized whilst in flight in conjunction with the road.
And so we touched on briefly earlier the fact that in order to, when for instance a customer buys one of these, they then go through a training process how to operate the vehicle.
Yeah, so we've taken one step ahead and tried to preempt any uncertainties on the market and also for our future customers. So we've already established a Fly Drive Academy. Now this will be part of the sales package, and this will include not only flight training but initial road training as well, to get people fully accustomed with the vehicle and for them to maximize the use of it. So the last thing we want is for people to buy one of these and then feel afraid to use it as either a flying machine or even a driving machine. So it's really crucial to us that we get the Flight Academy and working together with the customers and make sure that everyone's got a really happy experience.
It's unbelievable. So in terms of, because obviously battling, you touched on something that I was wondering earlier actually. So when people buy one of these, surely they must have that feeling, or I suppose they will have that feeling of, I could fly, but maybe not, because you're now going into a market that no one else has, which is the people who are driving and now actually have the choice to fly. Do you think that one of your big challenges could be potentially making sure that people do realise that it is a good idea to fly? Because before, obviously, you had, I've got my Porsche in the garage and I've got my helicopter in the hangar, but now you're going to the people who've got this and a VW Golf, and they're able to fly. Do you think that will be a challenge in terms of for your customers, and to show them that it truly is something that is necessarily possibly easy to do?
I think there are many challenges psychologically for people to overcome. I think when anybody that has actually owned or operated a helicopter privately will realize that the advantages are sometimes outweighed by the disadvantages. So you may not always be able to travel from where you want to be and where you want to go. So if you're, for example, flying into the centre of London, it's not likely that you can land at the office, but maybe Battersea and so on, and that then entails extra then transportation. So one of the beauties of the flying car is you can drive to or from a location where you can take off, off, you can land at an airport, and then you can clearly drive from that airport to your point of destination. But an added bonus for all of the private pilots out there that sometimes are placed in positions in weather that God forgive that we get some clouds or rain or something like this on the way back, they can divert and merely elect to drive the rest of the journey. And that's a very, very important aspect of the flying safety of the flying car.
And so, in terms of distances for takeoffs and landings, obviously with a strong headwind, I suppose you could come in like a helicopter, but
Sure.
if you wanted to, could you, for instance, on a normal non-windy day, could you land this on a helipad if you wanted to?
Probably not.
No?
On a regular non-windy day, you would probably be having a run of between 10 to 25 meters, and that would be relatively easy to achieve. Takeoff, of course, would require slightly longer distances. On an average day, you may be using 200, 250 meters. It can be a lot less, as you said, depending on the wind, but as a general rule, that would be what we would suggest.
So, and as you said that you couldn't necessarily be driving on the M25 or the A303 and go, right, you know what, traffic, let's go. Will there be, how will it work? Because I sort of roughly know about aviation in terms of how it works, going to a runway, things like that. Will you only be able to go to a airfield or a runway in order to take off? Or will there be certain sort of loopholes, if you will, that allow you to take off in a non...
Yeah, good question, Zach. And I know that certain countries, including the Netherlands, we are talking and working with regional governments to enable the possibility and potential of motorway exit available runway slots for the future of the flying car. In Britain, we are quite exclusively fortunate to have the ability to take off and land from any location, providing we have landowners' permission and it doesn't affect or contradict any existing aviation laws. So if you have a field and it's not in a urban area, you are able to take off and land from that field. So we are quite advantageous in that situation.
So will you be landing one here in the future then?
Yeah, just keep looking up.
Just keep looking up and eventually we'll see if Pal V coming in home.
Absolutely.
No, that's fantastic.
Yeah, so clearly we have the rotor system on the top of the vehicle, and the mast itself, and the virtue of the tail will pull back, the mast lifts up, that locks into position, the rotors fold out, and then here you have the propellers which will be pushing the aircraft through the air and allowing the auto-rotation to take effect. So it's quite an interesting system.
And one thing I've noticed as well, how when you very James Bondy, you can move the number plate up and then you're greeted by an exhaust behind it, which I think that's very James Bondy. I like that, and so whoever's come up with that is very. There's quite something. And actually, in terms of number plates, front number plates.
Depending on the legislation of the country, currently the Netherlands doesn't require this vehicle to carry a front number plate, so it can still look pretty sexy.
So they can actually still get away with not having front plates, because nowadays it's a bit... But I tell you what, I'm looking forward to the day when someone gets pulled over for speeding in this. And I know personally, if I was ever pulled over for speeding in one of these, I'd just fly off, just to go away and just catch me if you can. Why not?
Who do you think you are, Biggles?
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know, something, isn't it? But no, let's head round to the front and we'll touch on something else, which I promise you guys it'll be at the end. So, one thing that I found very interesting, and I've been around helicopters, is weight with fuel. How does weight affect the range and the fuel consumption of the aircraft and car?
Yeah, so good question, and of course, yeah, you're right, the weight and the overall fuel capacity will have a determining factor on how far you can go. We're very lucky, we have a great team that have created this vehicle that has a net weight of around 660 kilos. So we have a usable weight which allows us to not only fully fill the tanks, but for us to, for example, what are we doing in the next half an hour? We could jump over the pond and we could be in Paris. We can go down the Champs-Élysées, we can pick up a nice sandwich, go into the local boutique and either drive back by filling up with regular car fuel, or we can take the flight back just straight over the channel again. So it's a very, very versatile machine.
And in terms of actual weight, whether it be dry or wet, do you know the figures of the actual weight of the vehicle?
Yeah, 660 kilos.
And is that wet or dry?
That's dry.
That's dry. And so wet, roughly, do you know what it might be?
Well, you're going to be looking at we'll get a 100 litre tank, so about another 85 kilograms on board.
Okay.
Like that, yeah.
and a 100-litre tank. That's a big tank.
Sure. So the range of the vehicle would be over 700 miles on the road. For the flying, we could do something in the region of 3 hours with the small reserve, say 2.5 to 3 hours, depending on your cruise speed. So
that's unbelievable. And so was that one of the things that when building a flying car, that was the main thing, to be able to have an impressive figure of range and hours usable?
Yeah, and I think that, to be fair, what we haven't really touched upon is that a lot of people's ideal of a flying car comes from some science fiction, maybe some electric-powered, drone-esque type machine. Now, whilst they are very exciting, the reality is, as I believe you are only too aware, electricity and electric-powered vehicles do have their limitations. And how long is the extension lead with that charging cable? So currently the technology doesn't allow us to utilize electronic power and batteries for a sufficient range. I mean, we're talking 20 minutes would be pretty good today, and that quite clearly isn't enough. So having the Rotax motors in the back really does give us an advantage. And again, it's aviation, so people know the Rotax is the number one aircraft.
Yeah, even I'm not as to do with aircraft, I even know Rotax. So, and finally, the last thing I'd like to touch on, price.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is there an official price, or, because I remember we spoke, would you prefer people to have a look on the website so they can see depending on country, or? I mean,
there are certain specification changes per country, as you would expect. However, we've priced the vehicle, I would say, competitively, and yes, people are invited to come and check out their own website pages for their country specific. We're probably somewhere in the region of a very competitive, modern Ferrari pricing, so we're banging the market, and I think good value for money for an aviation product.
Well, I tell you what, nowadays you have one of these in your garage and you have a Ferrari, I think people are going to go to this quicker than they're going to go to the Ferrari. But I want to say a very big thank you for coming along and bringing this incredible machine to the garage. And thank you for giving me your time. You know, I know you guys are very busy, and I know you guys have just come from Salon Privé, so to have a car from Salon Privé straight to ours is quite something. So thank you for that. And as promised, I told you guys that we'd be having something special happening. Well, I'm glad to say that I'm partnering up with PAL-V to show you the future of flying cars, and these guys are ahead of the curve when it comes to flying cars, and so I'll be able to show you in the future the first ones on the road and the first ones in the air. So as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon. Cheers. So since filming this video, Andy and the team at PAL-V have actually certified the car to be road legal. So many congratulations for them. It's the first step in something that is going to be huge. I look forward to future endeavours with them, and we're going to have a great time showing you the progress of this truly unique way of transportation. So as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon. Cheers.